So welcome to today's webinar on housing solutions. My name is Garth Brown, and together with my National Housing Committee colleagues, I want to thank you for attending today's presentation, and in many cases, inviting other Vincentians to join us as well. The St. Vincent de Paul National Housing Campaign to work towards establishing safe, secure, and affordable housing for all began a couple of years ago. And as our event progresses, you'll meet our committee members, Elaine, who is based in Kelowna, Corey from Ottawa, Maria from Edmonton, and Ray and Paul from Halifax. I sincerely thank all of them for their support and guidance in creating and facilitating today's event. A very special thanks goes to Jose and Nicole at National Council, who have helped to both promote and orchestrate today's event. Their Zoom knowledge was far superior to mine, so I thank them both for helping us out. And I also want to sincerely thank my predecessor and friend, Jim Padden, who transitioned from his role of chairing our committee last year and now heads the Social Justice Committee in Ontario. Jim's energy and initiative is boundless and has brought us to where we are today. And I will note, and I'll probably mention it again towards the end, that we are always looking for new members to join our national committee. Please reach out to us if you would like to play a role in helping to shape our future ambitions. I kindly request everyone not scheduled to speak at this time to mute yourself to avoid echo, and would now invite Elaine to recite our Indigenous land acknowledgement. And I'll bring it up on our screen here and share my screen accordingly. Elaine?
Yeah. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to take a moment to acknowledge the Indigenous peoples of all the lands and water that we are on today, and the importance of the land which we each call home. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their histories, laws, faith traditions, cultures, and their concerns regarding our shared environment, including safe water. From coast to coast to coast, we acknowledge the ancestral and unceded territory of all the Inuit, Métis, and First Nations people that call this nation home.
Thank you very much, Elaine. Now, I'll now invite Corey to guide us in our campaign prayer for housing. Corey?
Gracious and loving God, we come to you out of care and concern for especially the poor and those struggling to find adequate shelter. Though he is divine, your son Jesus did not cling to his divinity, but humbled himself to pitch his tent among us. He was loved and cared for by Mary and Joseph in Nazareth. He invited the first disciples to spend time with him in his home, yet often had no place to lay his head during his ministry. He taught us to love you above all, then others and ourselves, and all of creation, which he often used in his parables to convey his message of new life. Help us to love and serve him in the widow, the orphan, the stranger, and especially in the poor. Grant us wisdom to make good decisions in our ministry to the poor, strength to carry out those decisions, humility to accept the ideas of others, and joy in striving to alleviate poverty in our society and to provide adequate housing as a basic human right for all. Inspire landlords to devote greater care and attention to the maintenance of their facilities, making life better for their renters. Fill the minds and hearts of the wealthy with an openness to be partners with us in finding and creating adequate housing for those most in need. United with our Blessed Mother and relying on the intercession of St. Vincent de Paul and Blessed Frederick Ozanam, we ask this of you through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who lives and reigns with you and the Holy Spirit, one God, forever and ever. Amen. And I just wanted to mention that this prayer was created especially for this program by the National Spiritual Advisor to the St. Vincent de Paul, whose name is Bishop Emeritus Sylvain Lavoie.
Thank you very much, Corey. And thank you, Elaine. When St. Vincent de Paul launched the National Action Plan on Housing 2 years ago, in accord with the federal government's declaration that housing is a human right in our country, we were not sure what would result. And throughout the past 24 months, we have worked to raise the awareness of the need for affordable housing and introduce solutions that Vincentians can initiate in their own communities, both individually and collectively. Our National Action Plan establishes key areas to focus on. Firstly, to listen to our neighbors and to understand what their housing needs are, to advocate on their behalf whenever and wherever possible, to create housing when the opportunity arises, to be agents of positive change, and to deepen our Vincentian spirituality while developing the society and bringing new members to St. Vincent de Paul. All the information on our plan can be accessed through the national site, and we'll certainly send links for those files to you subsequent to this meeting. Our three presenters today taking part will add to the depth and scope of the knowledge we've gained over the last 2 years, and we can benefit from everything they have to offer. Our goal today is to provide you with real-life examples of Vincentians in action, of our faith in action, and steps you can take within your council or conference to play a role in solving homelessness and housing insecurity in your own neighborhoods. As I mentioned earlier, this webinar will be recorded and will be available for everyone to see and share in the days to come. And we'll send each of you a link to the recording as well as related documents referenced throughout. To help expedite our time together, our three presentations will take place without breaks for Q&As. No doubt questions will be arising throughout each presenter sharing, and we ask that you send your questions either through the chat line at any time throughout the webinar or by raising your hand during the question and answer period, which will take place after our third presentation. Ray and Paul will ensure that all questions are brought forward during the Q&A period and directed to the presenter accordingly. Our first presenter is a seasoned veteran of creating and supporting affordable housing models throughout the Greater Toronto Area and beyond. Louise Coteau is Executive Director of the Society of St. Vincent de Paul Greater Toronto Central Council. Louise and her team oversee the acquisition and daily operation of several homes serving some of our most needy neighbors. I thank Louise for joining us today to share her experience and wisdom on how to make projects like these a reality and a success. Welcome, Louise.
Thanks very much. Well, it's nice to be here. I see a few familiar faces and nice to see everybody. I know you've got a packed agenda, so I will just jump right into it. And today I'm here just to show you different types of housing. We fully understand that Toronto has advantages just by virtue of being a huge city, and that it's not going to happen in every small entity, in every small place, in every mid-sized place. So I think what the message is that we've been able to capitalize on the fact that homes and programs and opportunities have come our way, and that our board of directors over the years, our current board, past boards, past committees have very bravely raised to the challenge and responded, because there'd be a lot of times where people would be like, this is a big deal. I don't know if we want to get into this. And thankfully they have. So this isn't about showing off. It's just showing what we have, and we fully understand the advantages we have to be able to do this. But I want to show you different types of housing that we have that maybe will help you and become more familiar with what's available and what you could access on your own. So there's the overview of what Toronto does mainly. So we've got our big Vincentian outreach. Toronto is big. We have 128 conferences and 11 particular councils. So it is a big, large center. And the employees that work for us are, for the most part, attached to our residential housing. So you'll see that as we go along. So our first I'm going to talk about our shelters first. And I put some pictures in. So, because sometimes people see pictures of shelters and I'm like, oh, our shelters sure don't look like that. So you have a different idea. So this is our beautiful Mary's home. It's a heritage building, which has proven to be challenging in different ways when it needs repairs, that's for sure. But it's at Queen, it's right downtown, down in the heart of Toronto. It's at Church and Gerrard. It's a 44-bed shelter for women, and we've been operating it since about 1994. And it's funded in part, it's funded in whole actually by the City of Toronto Shelter Housing and Support. And the society owns this building. So we had the opportunity to operate out of it for a couple of years, and then it was decided that it was going to be sold, and through a number of grants at the provincial level and the federal level, a little bit extra money from the city, we were able to buy it and secure it. So that's our Mary's home. And then our next shelter is Emily House. You'll recognize some of these names, I'm sure, for all you studied the life of Frederick Ozanam. So Emily House is located also in downtown Toronto. It's in the East End. It's at Queen and Pape. Now this building is actually owned by the City of Toronto still. It used to be a community health outlet, and they moved around the corner and this sat empty. And you can see the cornerstone at the very top. It was a police station. So it's been around, building's 110 years old. And the neat part about this building in the back is where the stables were for the horses. And that has been turned into an EMS station. So we're in the front part. And we have 22 women who live in here, and it's a bit of a different type of shelter because women can live there up to a couple of years. And it's for women that we draw from the emergency shelter system that seem to be ready and able to participate more in their own self-directed programs. So safe place to stay, somebody to help them out, and but a willingness on their part to maybe go back to school, get back to work. If you walk in this shelter in the daytime, you won't find anybody home. Everybody's out and busy. So that's the good news about Emily House. This is Elisa House. It is in the west end of Toronto, a little bit further west. It's not as beautiful, I guess, from the outside as the other ones, but it certainly is beautiful inside. So Elisa House is on the front of our warehouse. So the society bought a warehouse down in Mimico. But 20 years ago, we were up in a different part of the city, and it was really not an ideal place for us to be. So we bought the warehouse, and then at that time, it was around the year 2000, the city was asking for any unused space to be converted to shelters. So we went to the city and said, we have actually a very unused space at the front of our warehouse. And we were able, through a grant from Canada Mortgage and Housing and a little support from the City of Toronto and some Save As to Palm money, to convert the front into a 40-bed shelter. The women who stay in this shelter, it's a little bit different. So every program has its own unique clientele, even though they're under the same umbrella. And the folks that stay at Elisa House typically seem to be a little bit older, a little bit more settled. They don't want to be in the drama of downtown Toronto, which can be really hard for some folks to cope with. And, you know, this is in the far west end of Toronto, so we do get a lot of folks coming through the Red Cross because they are scooped at the airport and they're refugees that need immediate housing. So we do have a different type of outreach here. It's a lovely program. The challenge we've had with Elisa House is because it's a little further out of the downtown core, there's not a lot of services. So if you're going to run a shelter, you really have to be able to get access to other things. You can't just house people and hope that's a good day. People need all sorts of things, as you know, medical and employment and counseling. So we do incur extra costs getting these folks back into where some of those services exist. And that's the thing with a big city. People come to the city, they believe the services are there, and they are there. So then they stay, and then they need help. So no problem with that. It just causes a few challenges. You have to be able to support the folks once they come in. First thing is come in, be safe. The next thing is, how do we help you out? This is St. Clair's residence. look at all the beautiful green, and the blue sky I was looking at this morning, thinking that would be great to come back soon enough. St. Clair's is in the north part of Toronto. It's right at the very top of the city. Very unusual place to have a shelter. But the building became available to us through a group of nuns who were moving into a new site, and they wanted to do something that impacted women in need. So they worked with the society to transfer this building to us. It's quite large. It's not a great picture except for its stunning beauty with the weather. If you look to the right, you'll see that that building goes down and it becomes a third floor facility. And then you've got the little original bungalow on the left there. So when we had opportunity to pick up St. Clair's, we went to our funders, who are the City of Toronto, and asked them, you know, could we create something that's a little bit different than the emergency shelters and allow people to stay, because there is pressure in the emergency system to move people on. It's not like it used to be when I first started in the business. I have to say it's 40 years ago. It's a long time ago. And our first shelter we opened was in 1984, and I worked there as a frontline person. Those days you had to kick everybody out at 8 o'clock in the morning, and you couldn't open the doors again until 4. And it's just terrible what happened back then. So for these folks, they can come and they can live, and they have their own room, which is amazing in the shelter system. Our other shelters, you know, it's 2 or 3 women to a room, which is okay. Certainly it's not rows of people, but this is a gem. It's got individual rooms. So we're so lucky to have this program. And this is for women who really just need the next step in housing. We have been involved in different programs and different sort of opportunities with like banks and things like that to work on savings programs for first and last month's rent. So the goal is here, you come in, you're fairly self-sufficient. We have community rooms, we have communal meals, but then you have your own space. But there's an expectation that you're working on education, employment, and housing. But lives aren't perfect and things happen. And sometimes when people get calmed and settled, some issues come up that they've managed to beat down for a long time. And so it's not hard and fast. It's not like, here's your move out date, you better go. We're always trying to work towards a date, because we really aren't supposed to house people for life in this facility. But the backyard goes down to a ravine, and there's bunnies and deer. And why wouldn't you want to live there if you had to live in the city of Toronto? It is quite lovely. So we are looking to always find places for our women to move forward. But when they come to St. Clair's, the immediate pressure is off. They don't have to think, oh, this is emergency, I might have to leave soon. So those are the 4 shelters that we operate. And we've been in the shelter business, as I said, since about 1984. We haven't opened one lately. We're looking at an opportunity, but right now I think we're fairly focused on just moving into our recovery programs, which I'll show you in a minute. This is Ozanam House. This building was given to the society by a group that was trying to run something that didn't work out very well. So they transferred the ownership of the building to us. And that was a long time ago too. That was in the 1980s. And we've been able to maintain it and operate a 11-bed pre-treatment addiction center here. So gentlemen who have come out of the withdrawal management centers and are looking for a safe place to stay till they can get into residential treatment will come to Ozanam House. Their other alternatives are shelters, which is not conducive to clean and sober living, especially in the men's sector. And also people who try to go back home, they're not always welcomed. So Vincentians themselves came to the boards back in the 80s and said, we're seeing an awful lot of addiction issues, just making lives so difficult and impacting people and just being such a challenge. Can you guys do something about this? And then, then this house became available. So this is actually funded by the Ministry of Health. This is a part of your addiction envelope under the LINS section. It doesn't look very big, but it does go far back. And we do have a garage in the back that we've converted into a recreational space for the men. It's very controlled. If you're going to live here, You have to participate in the 12-step work, and you're not allowed to just go out and be on the street. If you need to go to the store, someone has to go with you. You're only going to stay well and stay clean if there's accountability. So we have had tremendous success with this program, and we've had people try it again and again and again, and then maybe on the 7th again, they've done well. So people are allowed to come back into our programs. We understand the tremendous challenges that addictions bring to people's lives, and we have great compassion for that. So we understand that it's not always going to work the first time, as hopeful as we are. So that's our little Ozanam house. So stemming from Ozanam House, we have the Vincent Paul Community Recovery Homes. So one of the jokes in the society is, how many configurations of St. Vincent de Paul can you come up with? And it was because we have a Camp Ozanam too. But anyway, we have to keep these straight. So we have 14 homes. I didn't put all 14 because they all kind of look like this is 57 Hills View. A couple are bungalows, a few are semis. But this is where we're at. This is what they look like. So what happens here is the men who go from Ozanam House to treatment, once they come out of treatment, a lot of them recognize they cannot go back to their old lives. So what do? So this is where we started the Vincent Paul Community Homes. They can live there for up to 12 months and sometimes longer if progress is being made in their recovery. There is no staff on site. The gentlemen who live in these homes, they pay the rent and they contribute to a collective food purchasing system. So they decide what to eat, what the menu is, they make their own decisions. So the society has one person in charge and a half employee who assists with all the administrative work. The interesting thing about this program is we own 4 of these houses for different reasons, just opportunities. We just took over the North Street home in Barrie because it was being run by Huronia Central Council and they couldn't run it anymore. So we were able to take that over because in this day and age, Barrie certainly is not far from Toronto. But the other homes we've rented for years and years and years from the Toronto Community Housing Corporation. And they're selling them to us. They're done with trying to keep all these homes up. They have a whole philosophy change going on, and we'll be the beneficiaries of that. So we've carefully gathered up our funds over the last 5 years, put money aside, and we're able to buy it's a package of 10 homes. So the program will be protected. We were very concerned when there was discussions at first about getting out of this type of housing with Toronto Community Housing. But there's us and 2 other agencies that operate homes. So they came to us and said, look, we believe in affordable housing. You can buy these homes. It's ridiculously low cost to buy them, but you must run affordable housing in them. So no flipping them and making big money off these things, which is good. So this is where they are. There's 78 beds in this portfolio. And often when people ask me, what type of housing should we get into? I always say this kind. It's easy. It's quite easy to run. It's you've got a dedicated group of clients who really want somewhere safe to stay and are, for the most part, really working on trying to move forward. So you've got sort of an easier target group in many ways. Do the addictions get the better of them? Absolutely. There's no question that happens and people stumble and people fail and then they have to start again. That's okay. But they know what their end goal is. Sometimes in the shelter system, it's so complex and so multi-layered that it's really hard to help people move forward. But this is a really great program. It doesn't cost a lot of money. For the most part, the rent covers, or what they're contributing covers our costs on the houses. And the Toronto Community Housing transfer is supposed to happen by the end of March. So if there's any of our board members on, they'll roll their eyes because I think I've told them that 3 Marches in a row now, but it is supposed to happen this year. So then we'll be able to protect this program and keep it operating for a very long time. So those are the VP homes. There's not too many left. I don't want to take up too much time. This is our developmental services. The society is very thrilled to be part of this outreach. We have these 2 homes. The other one I put on the next page. It's for people who have developmental challenges. They were homeless. A lot of them lived in institutions. Their families couldn't manage, or they were given up as young children and they were put in some of those places that have since been closed that you're all very aware of. So the Ministry of Community Social Services talked to its partners out, not-for-profits, and asked who would work with them through the Ministry of Housing to find homes and then convert them for accessibility, and then to welcome folks who need a place to live. So the folks that live in this program live with us for life. So they move in and they're our residents forever. Again, you'll see these DePaul, Vincent, and Martineau. I'm sure a lot of you know Bob Martineau, who was the president of the National Council for several terms. He was a Vincentian in the Scarborough areas where these homes came from. He was an absolute advocate in people's rights, and that all people are just people. So we were thrilled to name our 3rd house in this portfolio after him, and he was beyond honored because he was a very humble man. So we love these homes very much. The DePaul house is the one on the upper one with the fancy little California top to it. We've had DePaul House since 1986, and Martineau House is the new one in the portfolio. It's 2010, and this is Vincent House. It's all ramp. That's what it looks like from the street, but it's got a lot of ramps, this guy. But pretty much everybody in here, this house has significant mobility issues and significant care issues. So it really is a care home. So our residents have enriched lives. You know, some of the folks we took into these homes hadn't been outside the institution. We took in 4 residents at the same time to Martineau House when they closed the Huronia institution. And one of the 4 had been out for pizza. The others, for 20 years, stayed in the confines of that institution. So our folks are busy. Some of them have day programs, and some of them just take advantage of what so much things that's available to them in the community. Some of the residents are quite high functioning and can participate in various activities, and others need 100% care, feeding, bathing, toileting. So it's really quite a mix in there. They're a very tight group. They're each other's families. We do have some family involvement, which we're always grateful for. But we do have a number that have no family, so the society has become their family. So that's our beautiful Vincent House. And I guess the best story about this house, it's in Scarborough, Ontario, right? Part of Toronto. It's got a septic system. It's got septic systems in Toronto. So anybody outside of Toronto would say, so what? But it's a big deal in Toronto. It's very hard to keep this house serviced. So it's one little street that some planning person I think screwed up because it has no access to. We had to bring in all sorts of services for this guy. So those are developmental services. The next house is St. Francis. St. Francis is actually owned by Mainstay Housing, which used to be called the Supportive Housing Coalition. And that was a group that got together to provide housing to folks who had been discharged when the institutions discharged people with mental health issues rather than keeping them in the hospitals. So like CAMH, for instance. So in the 80s and 90s, all these folks were discharged, but they really were struggling. They were ending up in shelters, ending up on the street. So the Supportive Housing Coalition, now called Mainstay, scooped up a bunch of places around Toronto with a bunch of grants and worked with not-for-profit agencies to house people. So the folks at St. Francis, they've got to be some of my favorite residents, no question. And they've been around for the most part since we opened. And a couple of the women that live at St. Francis came from our first shelter. They would have been caught in a shelter system, and which is not very life-giving for a lot of people. So they're very vulnerable and they're lovely. This used to be a pop factory, and it was reconfigured, and the residents have their own rooms and they have a community kitchen, and it is staffed 24 hours a day. Not high-level staff, just one staff per shift to make sure people the meals are out and that people are well. They do room checks. People are remind folks sometimes to take a shower, where other folks are out in the community. So it's various levels there. We've had St. Francis a long time too. Since the 80s, I put it right there for you. The last house in our portfolio, it really isn't ours, and it's not a house, it's Gower Park Place. Toronto Central Council started Gower Park Place in, I think the ground turning was in 1992, and then it was occupied in 94. This is a large RGI facility in East York. And back then, the Ministry of Housing would basically hand you money if you could work with them. This was like one of the last big initiatives under that old grant configuration. So it is large and it is a little bit outside our usual stream. So the Ministry of Housing wanted it as its own corporation, which we fully understood. So it was transferred to the Vincent Paul Family Homes Corporation. This is the only building they operate. The board of directors is, the majority of the board are Vincentians still to this day. And there's also a requirement for residents who live in the facility to be on the board as well as community members. So it is still controlled by Vincentians, but it's not part of the Greater Toronto Central Council corporate world. So those are the things that we operate. And, you know, every time we say our opening and closing prayers with our Vincentians and our board members, I mean, we pray for this. People need a home. You can serve people in their homes for sure. We do that all the time. We have huge home visitation outreach. But if somebody doesn't have a home, then they just don't even have even the starting of the same opportunities. So we really very much believe in housing. We know that one room, 4 rooms, 44 rooms, whatever, they're all important. It doesn't have to be the biggest thing in the world. It just needs to be safe and sustainable. So being able to operate and fund or administer and ensure the longevity, that's the key. So, we got into that recovery home business mostly on rental agreements, thinking this will always be, how could Toronto Community Housing ever take them away? And then 5 years ago, it was like, well, we're going to divest ourselves of those programs. And it was heart stopping. That is a huge program in the city. But thankfully, we were able to negotiate purchasing them. So, sustainability is the key to housing, ensuring that your organization, your boards, your committees are able to keep it going, because people's homes are people's homes, and that's just such a critical part of our outreach. And that's our outreach in a nutshell.
Thank you very, very much, Louise.
You're welcome.
A phenomenal diversity of service to the community. I didn't count, but do you have a count off the top of your head, Louise, as to how many people live in the homes that you operate?
Yeah, so every night we have 270 people that stay in our programs. That's not including Gower. They've got their own, that's for them to talk about, but that's a very important outreach. But in our shelters and recovery homes, we have 270 beds on any given night.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much for your sharing.
You're welcome.
It's
my pleasure.
eye-opener for all of us. And again, questions and answers can follow our third presentation. So please hang in there, and we'll look forward to that discussion.
Thanks.
We now invite Larry McKenzie to share his depth of experience sourcing, developing, and building affordable housing projects in the City of London, Ontario. With hands-on experience in all aspects of these projects, Larry provides a wealth of information to benefit us today. Welcome, Larry.
Hi, Garth. Thank you very much for those kind words. As Garth is putting up my presentation, I just want to share some thoughts that Bishop Joseph Dabrowski shared with at a press conference announcing London Particular Council's first housing project. And I'll quote him and say, "It is an imperative part of our church's mission to care for the poor and the marginalized. It's a gospel imperative, and a priority of Pope Francis. It's important that we all work together in an effort to provide affordable housing and care for the most vulnerable members of our community. And my goal today for all of us is that wherever you are in this process, I ask you to consider taking that one extra step. Having heard the speakers today, consider taking that extra step and moving a project or conceiving a project and start on your journey. So next slide, please. Yeah. So the earlier side was basically saying, what's a Vincentian's responsibility during an affordability housing crisis? So we'll move on. And I basically want to share that there's 4 pillars my presentation is going to focus around 4 pillars, of which you could focus in on one of them and commit your life and your mission towards that particular area of housing in Canada. You could do 2 or maybe even 3, but however you want to share each step so that you know what the opportunities and the need is for each of them. So let's talk about advocacy. Next slide, please. First thing in advocacy, you have to understand it's a funding issue. Affordable housing, as Louise mentioned numerous times throughout her presentation, require government support and endorsement. And we have to make sure that government stays in the game. And for a long time, roughly from the 1990s up to about the middle of 2010s, meaning roughly 2015, the government's pretty well abandoned its place as a player in the housing market. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is where the reason we're at the situation, the critical situation we're in now today. So we have to keep hectoring for the need to provide community housing, social housing. And we have to do it through actions like this that we're doing today, sharing thoughts and building some skills and consensus around the issue to address housing. We have a local group, it's called the London Regional Social Council, and they've done wonderful work. They are in the midst of a petition that they're presenting to City Hall, demanding that the city call for a crisis in housing so that they can access more funds from the federal and provincial government to address the crisis in our community, which, by the way, right now, we have over 6,200 people looking for affordable housing, of which 2,200 are homeless. Another area that we have to advocate for and support are issues like rent control. I know you might seem this is beyond affordable housing, but it's key to affordable housing. In the last year, rents in the City of London went up almost 37%. And that is awful. So you can imagine that's taken an apartment that last year was $1,200 is now $1,800. Now, in fairness, most of it was done where the apartment or the condo was free. There was a tenant leaving, but the new rent was immediately jacked up by over a third. So this has created a real crisis for families, as you can imagine. So we need to control, while we're controlling rent to people who stay in an apartment, geared to cost of living, we're not doing it when apartments are vacant. And that's been a large part of the current problem as well. So the other issue we should be advocating for is creation of land trust, whether the urban community does it or they set up and support groups such as nonprofits who could start buying property in advance to avoid skyrocketing land prices. To give you an example, 10 years ago, I was involved in the purchase of a plot of land, roughly just short of an acre. And it cost us $40,000 to buy that property. This year, I'm sorry, at the end of 2022, we secured an agreement with a group to buy a similar size lot, and the price was 1.2 million. So it's gone up 400% in 10 years. So somewhere along the way, we have to create something that will make land more affordable for nonprofits to get involved in building affordable housing. The other issue we should be advocating for is to increased incomes. For example, the minimum wage in Ontario right now is $15.05. The actual living wage in our city of London is $18.50. So the difference is almost 20% difference between the living wage and the minimum wage. So we should be advocating with our political masters that they really address this issue seriously. The other thing we should be addressing is increase in social assistance to people. In Ontario, the rate for a single person right now on Ontario Works is $733 per month. Our proposed new project that we want to build in London, we're hoping to keep the rents below $1,000. So you can see right off the bat that somebody on Ontario Works, as they call it, which is our social assistance, wouldn't even be able to afford the monthly rent at the apartments we hope to build. So we have to keep advocating for increases in social assistance. Next slide, please. So after advocacy, I suggest, and one could stay there, by the way, and just be a part of that group that just advocates and marches and goes to council and advocates for more housing. You could stay there, and that would be a very important job and a very important mission to want to undertake. But if you want to take that extra step and go, well, what can we do actually to alleviate the problem and consider the possibility of building, you might start by doing a lot of local research. And the first thing is land. Without land, any project is just talk. It's a dream. So once you have land, then a whole slew of services and possibilities open up for you. And so get to know the land opportunities in your city. If you can work with somebody who can do some financial modeling, that would be another step to take, such as, okay, we have this land, we're going to pay $1.2 million for it. How can we make that a property, a building, sustainable, given that rent, plus the cost of construction, et cetera, and all the other costs, and the operating costs to operate it, as Louise talked about on numerous occasions with her shelter system. So, because if you can't produce a financial model that shows that it's viable and sustainable, you're not going to get any support for it. The next thing you should understand that there are various options for affordable housing. Beyond the shelter system that Louise articulated so well, you have cooperative housing that's available. Supportive housing, and supportive housing is that people often use the phrase wraparound services. So people coming off of out of homelessness really require these wraparound services. So that's a distinct part of the offering that should be made in every community that should be available. The other thing is affordable housing, and that's basically directed to the working poor who cannot afford the $1,800 rent I mentioned earlier, but maybe could afford the $1,000 rent. And that's where, by the way, in London, that's the target group that we are hoping to build, is affordable housing. And which each of those units, by the way, whatever concept you decide to build, you need accessible units. And in Ontario, you have to build at least 20% of your units have to be accessible. Now, there are some other opportunities where you can have affordable rent, where you can have a path to ownership of those properties. And there's others. Next slide, please. In the local research, you have to determine where the need is. Is it amongst youth? Are seniors having trouble getting housing? Are racial communities having trouble? Are the indigenous community, et cetera, refugees, immigrants, LGBTQ, and a host of other groups that would like housing and need housing for that matter. So identify your target group, and then, because they might have special needs in terms of the construction specifications of any building you contemplate. Might want to consider finding out who are proven affordable house constructors in the city, and spending some time to get to know them and what they do and how they do it. Most cases, they're always very open to sharing their concepts and sharing their governance models and their practices with you. So don't be shy. Get on the phone, see if you can meet with them, and they, in most cases, I'll tell you, they'd be delighted to share their experience and their history with you. The other area you have to consider with any application for support, you're going to have to qualify the need. And in our city, as I mentioned earlier, we have a need for over 6,200 people who are looking for affordable housing. And so that's already been established for us, but it may be some communities, if you don't know, you should check. And you might start with your local housing, your municipal housing department, who I'm pretty sure would know that data and be able to share that with you. But it's a prerequisite for any going forward with any application. So Garth, the next one, please. So let's say you now decide, okay, you've done your research and there is a need and you identified a group and you want to now consider building. Well, the first things, and this is from experience with our own group here in London, once we started talking about it and we went back to our bylaws and letters patent, we found there was no real mention of specifically of raising money to build affordable housing. So we had to go about amending our bylaws to make sure we were consistent with CRA and mostly CRA and Corporations Ontario or Corporations Canada. So check your bylaws and make sure they're right. The other thing, you need money. There's no way of avoiding it. You can't do anything if you don't have money, and you have to raise money. And as mentioned earlier, there's a lot of generous people in communities right across the country who know this is a desperate situation and want to participate in the solution. So consider the following GoFundMe page. Maybe an angel investor that you know who's wealthy in the community, you may want to get behind it and become basically a patron for you. And consider, as we're in the midst of in London here, we're actually organizing a fundraising drive to raise roughly $7 million over the next 5 years. So with that, you can also have events. We decided not to go with events for the simple reason we find that they're potentially time consuming and not very efficient in terms of the benefit from the amount of time spent organizing them and running them. Spend a lot of time searching for the property site that you want to work with. That's the key item. I want to consult with, I'd like to switch those and consult with the housing department before you consult with members of city council. The housing department are the people who are actually going to help you put together your package. That'll eventually go to city council and then hopefully approved. But working with the administrators and bureaucrats in your community will be very helpful to move the project along. So open up lines of communication with them and be prepared to alter your plans because generally their advice is very good. They're very practiced at this. They part of development in communities, that's their specialty, and they know how to best use for land. So take their advice, and you'll find that your project will be better for it. And of course, consult with your counselors, and especially those in the area that you're actually the community that you're actually going to build in. The other key ingredient is to open up a dialogue with Canadian Mortgage and Housing Corporation as soon as possible. And frankly, the sooner the better. Each community has a outreach officer who will help you walk you through the steps you have to take. They'll give you direction, and they're invaluable, frankly. So, and they're everywhere, as I said, straight across the country. You might contact your local office or the National Office of Central Mortgage and Housing, and they'll direct you to who is working in your particular neighborhood or your particular community. And then we have a very good, London Community Foundation is a very good organization, very, very committed to improving the housing situation in our community, and have created a fund to help organizations to bridge financing, to help you, for example, potentially buy the land you need, and at very favorable rates, I might add. And then if it's approved, then you can go to Central Mortgage and Housing and ask for full approval, and the city as well, by the way. But so there's 2 places you should, or 3 places: get in touch with your housing department, get in touch with Canadian Mortgage and Housing, the outreach person for your community, and then also your local community foundation. Next slide, please. So how do you deal with the situation now? We have 6,200 people in our community living in tents along the Thames River that snakes its way through all of London. You could help with the providing food for those people who are living in tents. You could advocate for them at City Hall to, and most cities have done this, by the way, but have set up emergency shelters, created hotel rooms for them for people to stay. Might help people who build transitional housing, and wherever you can, and do whatever you can there. You personally might want to consider volunteering at a shelter, and Louise outlined there where volunteers are instrumental to the work that they do, and or consider shadowing a board who is active in building affordable housing, so you get some sense of how to go about this as well. And I'll finish in this section by donating to the food bank, who provides the food for the homeless community and those struggling with housing affordability as well. And donate to groups such as St. Vincent de Paul, who want to build affordable housing in our community. Next slide, please. I think we'll just skip that one because questions are going to come up after. And I just want to close by thanking you all for coming to hear this presentation today, be a part of this webinar. And thank you for supporting affordable housing in your towns and across Canada. Thank you very much.
And we thank you, Larry, immensely for obviously a journey that you've taken firsthand to make a difference and make a reality for housing in London. I'm sure there'll be several questions relevant to your discussion. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
Our final speaker provides us with a unique and very necessary aspect of our ministry. If we are able to be successful in our endeavor to create affordable housing in our community, we need to align and collaborate with existing agencies, individuals, government bodies, as Larry just referred to, and other services who are like-minded and contribute to the ultimate success of our initiatives. Bob Buckham is doing this within the Archdiocese of Vancouver, and has kindly offered to share his experience with us today. Welcome, Bob.
Thanks, Garth, and thanks everyone, and thanks for taking some time on Saturday to come on to this. So, yeah, first off, the heart of a Vincentian is like the Lord's heart, and I've always said that. I'm a Vincentian myself, but all the efforts that St. Vincent de Paul makes are just above and beyond. So, as a group, I just want to say, thank you to everyone. So just a little bit about myself. So for 20 years, I've been prison ministry, coordinator of prison ministry. And I always say that the heart of a prison ministry volunteer is similar to that of a Vincentian. Quite often you're dealing with the same folks, people who have had maybe a touch with the law at some point in their life. So I deal with people before they go in, while they're in, and after they've been released. And then we also deal with sexual offenders when they're released with an organization called COSA. I also, for the Archdiocese of Vancouver, sorry, I forgot to mention that. So I'm with the Archdiocese of Vancouver. I'm also, besides the coordinator for prison ministry, also the coordinator for service and justice, which looks after a number of groups like Hispanic ministry, the migrant farm workers ministry, refugees. I oversee street ministries, anti-human trafficking, so and whatever else the Archbishop tells me to do. So I do a few things, and I'm happy to be here today. So one of the things that I just want to mention that, I don't know about other dioceses in Canada, but many of you have probably heard of the downtown east side in Vancouver. And everybody's got their poor and they're disadvantaged, but the downtown east side is something else. If you've ever seen it or seen it in the paper or what have you, it is an area of addiction, unemployment, crime, homelessness, hopelessness, and they're all intertwined with each other. If somebody is got an addiction, sometimes it's involved with criminal activity. It's very nasty down there, and so I've done a lot of, I won't say work down there, but a lot of investigation down there. I've been down there a lot, seeing how the folks live in what they call SROs, single room occupancy places. And a lot of people would rather live on the street than be in these SROs. They're full of cockroaches, needles, condoms, one bathroom per floor. It's a nasty situation in Vancouver. And then, of course, to compound that is the prices of houses, of course, right across Canada is exorbitant, as Louise and Larry outlined, but in Vancouver it's at a whole other level. I mean, there's nothing below $1 million, if not 2 million and 3 million. So it's very difficult. But I don't want to run around with my hair on fire or throw up my hands and say nothing can be done. So but just a quick fact, and I'm going to repeat this because I'm going to say it quickly, but then I'm going to repeat it. There are 116 agencies in the Vancouver area that have 496 buildings that support affordable housing. So affordable, non-market, subsidized, whatever you want to call it. So 496 buildings that house 29,500 people. So I'll just repeat that again. There's 116 agencies, and those could be churches or secular agencies that support 496 buildings in the Vancouver area, and they house 29,500 people. The sad fact is none of those are Catholic. And that, and I'm not pointing the finger at any archbishop or the diocese or what have you. It's just a fact. Out of 116 agencies, none are Catholic. Now, That doesn't mean that we don't do other things like recovery houses and street ministries, etc. But just for affordable housing, we're not in the game. So that's disturbing in itself. And but there are 260 agencies, other not housing agencies, but just 260 agencies that spend over $1 million a day to look after the downtown east side. And as you've probably seen, read, or heard, it's getting worse. No matter what anybody is spending or how they're doing it, it's uncoordinated. They're all well-intentioned, but not coordinated. So the federal government, the provincial government, we have a new premier and a new mayor of Vancouver. Everybody is saying they have the answer, but unfortunately, nothing has happened. And it's a very, very difficult situation. So, but that doesn't mean we can't do anything. And I've got a couple of ideas that maybe can help St. Vincent de Paul, to continue what you're doing right across the country, which is just fabulous. So one of the things I did was I said, okay, we have agencies that are associated with the Archdiocese of Vancouver, but in many cases, a lot of these agencies and ministries operate like islands unto themselves. And I might suggest that St. Vincent de Paul, with all their good works, is another one that is kind of an island unto themselves. I'm very much in tune with what's happening with St. Vincent de Paul. I'm using as much of the resources of the Archdiocese of Vancouver to try to bolster what's happening. I know that volunteerism is dropping. A lot of St. Vincent de Paul conferences are literally dying off, aging out. And people look behind them and say it's time for somebody else to do something, and they look behind them and there's nobody there. So we're getting less and less, and I'm sure you're seeing that right across the country. So one of the things I did was I said, let's get all of our ministries together under one roof. So I organized a meeting at the Archdiocese of Vancouver Pastoral Center, and we have 3 street ministries. So I gathered them together. We have 3 recovery houses, 2 for women and 1 for men, similar to the ones that Louise showed. We have what's called the Doors Open. The Doors Open is a place where in the downtown east side where meals are served during the day. We have the men's shelter. So I had those folks there. And I had the Domestic Abuse Society that looks after abuse to women there as well. And then I said, okay, let's get our parish organizations. So the CWL was there, Knights of Columbus was there, St. Vincent de Paul was there. And so we gathered all of these groups together to say, hey, we're all trying to do the same thing here. Let's see what everybody's doing. And so we had a long meeting, and I invited folks that are in the housing business. So I had an architect come talk about, some ideas he has. We invited a professor, Julian Summers. Now I noticed in one of the position papers for St. Vincent de Paul, I think it was point 22, that you had talking about scattered housing versus congregate housing. So Dr. Julian Summers is probably the greatest proponent of scattered housing in Canada. So I had him come and speak to our group. And then we also have a successful model in downtown Vancouver. It's called Holway House. The owner of that is Jenny Conkin. She came and spoke to the group as well. I won't get into the details of everything because that's a whole other meeting. But I guess the point there was that it's really great to combine all of what the Catholic Church is doing in a particular diocese and get together, find out what everybody else is doing, and then see how each can help. I mean, when we were there, we had a lot of cross dialogue. One group was saying, oh, I need funding for this. And immediately, the Knights of Columbus representative for British Columbia, he stood up and said, you need money for this, you just ask us. We can help you, whatever you need money for. So, it was so encouraging because, now the Catholic Church is all getting together, and instead of just, a St. Vincent de Paul trying to do their thing, and a Knights of Columbus trying to do their thing, or a street ministry trying to do their thing. Everybody was in the same room and gathered together, and there was a lot of crosstalk happening about what I need, what I do. Other groups saying, hey, we can help you here, we do this, maybe we can provide food for this. So that's the one thing that I might suggest for St. Vincent de Paul, is maybe in your diocese, gather all of these agencies, the Knights of Columbus and the CWLs, your street ministries, your recovery houses, get them all under one roof. And I even said that at the very beginning of the meeting, I said, I don't know what's going to happen in this meeting. I really don't have a great agenda. I just want you all to see each other. And some of these folks have been, a lot of them knew each other, but some of them didn't. They've been in the business for 20 years and they go, I've heard about you, but I've never met you. So it was quite encouraging that, so you don't feel that you're alone. And there's a lot of folks trying to do a lot of great things. And, from today, you've shown what you are, obviously we're just talking housing today. I know St. Vincent de Paul is into so many various things. And so there's a lot of synergy that can happen. So that's one idea that I would suggest. And we've got the Archdiocese of Vancouver also has a large project that we're planning in the next couple of years. It's called the Doors Open Redevelopment Project, where we're looking at developing a large multi-story building that'll have market housing, non-market housing, rehabilitation, counseling, all sorts of different facets of it that will, hopefully satisfy a lot of the needs in the downtown east side. So that's another thing as well, that as Louise and Larry were mentioning, if you do get land or you have access to a building, you might want to look at it in a multiple use kind of facility. Like, for example, just a small thing, but it's a huge thing. In talking to, like, I'll go to the downtown east side and I'll just talk to the people on the street. I'll take them out for lunch and just say, what's going on? Why are so many people homeless or feeling destitute, hopeless? What's going on? And one of the things, besides telling me 100 things, one of the things was, we have nothing to do. We're very capable. We would like to work, but we would also like to do some recreational activity. Like, we live in these 10 by 14 SRO rooms, but there's nothing for us to do. So people get into trouble. And so I look at some of the other projects that we're doing, and they have places where guys and ladies can congregate, play cards, or chat, or have a tea, or whatever it is. So if you're looking at various buildings, maybe look at them to be multiple use. It's just a thought there. So, those are some of the ideas, but I'm working on another project, and I saw Joanna's name here. I guess she's probably still on here. So Joanna's with St. Luke's Parish in Maple Ridge, and I'm in Abbotsford. So one of the things we've been doing, and this I think can help St. Vincent de Paul, and Garth, correct me if I'm wrong, did I not read a paper from St. Vincent de Paul that was talking about talking to people who already have basement suites or extra rooms, and kind of repurposing them for folks that need housing? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah, there's bylaws allowing secondary suites now, so that can be a basement apartment or an addition or a detached dwelling on a property that have actually recently been magnified with provincial guidelines in Ontario and elsewhere. So there's certainly opportunity to increase equity on properties, and speaking to that scattered site model, create affordable housing throughout neighborhoods, not just in one building, but scattered throughout communities and neighborhoods throughout the country. So yes,
Yeah.
definitely opportunity.
Great idea, genius idea. That's so I've got an idea for you. that is in its infancy right now, but I want to let you know what we're doing here. So for many years, so I'm going to kind of go off topic and then I'm going to come back onto topic. So for many years, being a Catholic, obviously my entire life, I've noticed that people come to Mass on a regular basis, though we've lost a lot of folks, through various reasons why people don't come to Mass anymore, and even coming out of the pandemic, we've lost a fair amount of folks not coming to Mass. But just in the fact that when people come to Mass, you get a lot of folks that just come to Mass and then you don't see them until the next Sunday, the next Sunday, the next Sunday, the next Sunday, etc. And they don't get involved with their parish. So I thought, and I've been at up at the podium at the lectern talking about, hey, whoever, we need more volunteers for St. Vincent de Paul. And you go to the back in the foyer afterwards, and usually you get maybe 1 or 2 people, and or maybe 0 people. I mean, I'm sure you've all experienced that, whether you're talking for the CWL or Knights of Columbus or prison ministry or whatever it is. Folks are in the pews, you make a petition, you go to the foyer afterwards, and then you say, come and see me. And usually you get about 0 people to come forward. And so that's been an observation. And I said, you know what, we got to do something about this. And I said, I want to see people activated in their faith. I want folks to, open up their hearts, open up their minds, hear the call of the Lord, and be more involved with their faith. So we put together a project that we've done 2 parishes, and now next week I'm talking to another 3 or 4, and we're going to try to do every single parish in the Archdiocese. Bottom line is this: we can create anywhere between, I'll say, 200 to 500 volunteers in a parish in 1 weekend. I know that sounds amazing. We've done a test. St. Luke's is a smaller parish, and I won't go into the details of how we do it, but basically it's this. We found out in 1 weekend at all the masses who has a heart for helping their parish in some capacity. And we don't want you to sign up for anything. We just want to know if you have a heart for helping the Lord. We got them to mark down their names, their phone numbers, their email addresses. And in a smaller parish like St. Luke's, they thought that they might get 50 people to say yes. They got 191. In a larger parish like St. Anne's in Abbotsford, they thought they'd get about 50. We got 338. So, and those aren't huge parishes, they're just parishes. We figured that if I scale this out to every parish in the Archdiocese, we will get an extra over 20,000 people who have a heart for volunteering in some capacity for the Lord, for the ministries. It could be prison ministry, it could be street ministries, it could be St. Vincent de Paul, it could be. So the beauty of it is we're not asking them to sign up for anything, but what we do afterwards is we get their names and phone numbers, and then we have a committee that calls all of these folks and finds out what do they have interest in. And there's a great long laundry list of things that we have. It starts from, you like cutting the grass. Do you like, could you visit shut-ins? Do you have a car? Do you like doing administrative work? You like doing things around the church? The list goes on and on. It's got about 50 different items. And we just want to find out what people want to do. So we're not trying to, peg them into a hole. We're finding out what they like to do. So it could be ministries that are inside the parish, could be from outside the parish, or it could just be, hey, ask me to do anything, I'd be happy to do it, because we finally ask people. So we're getting huge numbers of people who want to do something for the church. I'm happy to expand this to every other diocese in the country, but just give me a little time because we are just working through the nuts and bolts of it now, but it's very successful. I'll come back to the reason, two reasons. One is I think that St. Vincent de Paul can do a great job with finding more volunteers for each of their conferences in every single parish by doing this. But more to the point here, which Garth was just alluding to, is imagine if you in your parish had an extra 200, 300, 400 people who said, yes, I want to do something more for the Lord. And then through that volunteer coordinator who is sort of overlooking these 200 to 500 people in the parish, you float the idea, hey, how many of you have an extra room in your basement or something like that? That, you know, we really have a need to house the folks that are on the street or need affordable housing. And I have a strong suspicion that people will come forward. So every church that has a St. Vincent de Paul conference in it, or even if they don't, the folks that say, I want to do something more for the Lord can be petitioned and say, hey, do you have room in your house? We need your help. And so there might be a wave of folks that can maybe help what you're putting forward, which I think is fabulous. So I just wanted to put that forward. As I said, we have started that process here in the Archdiocese of Vancouver, and probably within a couple of months, after I'm working through our 2 test parishes and have probably gone through another, 4 or 5 parishes, so we work out the bugs of the, how we're going to do it exactly. I'd like to share that. So anyway, I just wanted to share those ideas with you. One, getting all the ministries together under one roof, how you can all work with each other and see the synergy that's happening. And then 2, this parish volunteer project.
That's wonderful, Bob. Thank you very much. I think the idea of going out to meet different entities in the housing field independently is daunting. So your idea of bringing them all together collectively to listen before we start to try to be understood ourselves. Let's listen to understand where they're at and what their needs are, and inviting Knights and CWL in as well is a way of collaborating effectively with our faith in action. I think there's probably of those attending right now, probably 95 or 99 or 100% of us are interested to ask if you would be kind enough to share your script that you've used to date in the test parishes, inviting people to follow their hearts and helping the Lord. So if you have a draft of what you've been using to date, I'm sure that would be wonderful to see and to share.
And to that point, so I did make a presentation with Joanna Cross to the BC St. Vincent de Paul and spoke to them. I said, please just be patient with me for just a little bit, because I know what I say and what the priest says, and I've got a handbook now that's about 15 pages long that basically delineates everything that you need to do to be successful with this. But I want to make sure that I can execute it properly, and then I'm more than happy to speak to every single archdiocese in the country in how to expand this, because I think this is it's bigger than all of us here. I mean, that's living your faith, activating your faith, becoming a missionary church. I mean, that's what St. Vincent de Paul is. In my heart, I would love everybody to be a Vincentian, and but we need to bring the average age down. We need to get more people involved. And there's so many, I think if we're going to do any legacy with the Catholic Church, it's let's get everybody involved with their faith, get people in their 20s, their 30s, get them involved with the parishes and all the outreaches that you're doing. And let's do a revitalization. So we're working on that. And I can probably say, I can probably come back to this group in, 2 to 3 months and say, let's get after it. So that's my commitment to St. Vincent de Paul, and hopefully I can honor that.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Bob. And Elaine, maybe I'll ask you to keep in touch with Bob as we move forward from our committee perspective, because there's so many great insights that have been shared.
I
Really
will,
good.
and I will twist his arm backwards, forwards, and I know he lives in Abbotsford, so yes, we will get this. But thanks, Bob. This is really great. And wouldn't it be great to get 200 volunteers in every single parish in Canada?
Fantastic.
And knowing Elaine, she will twist my arm.
Get ready.
Yeah.
Alrighty. Thank you so very much, Bob. And our thanks to Louise, Larry, and Bob for all their time and energies sharing what they've done today. Now, while this concludes our 3 formal presentations, the chat line has been active right from the start. And I'll now ask Ray and Paul to moderate the question and answer session. Paul will certainly share questions that were raised in the chat line, and Ray will facilitate questions you may have when you raise your hand on the screen. You can do so by clicking the raise your hand icon at the bottom of your screen. I believe it's at the bottom, might be at the top. But then wait for Ray to call your name. Again, we ask you to keep your questions brief and to the point to allow for everyone to participate. And again, to avoid echoes, we'd ask that you continue to remain muted unless you're in the process of asking or answering questions accordingly. Now, we'll do our best to answer as many questions as possible, but if we are running out of time, we'll make sure that we follow up and get the questions answered through emails to everyone who's in attendance. So with that, I'll pass things over to Ray.
Hi, folks. Yeah, so hopefully you've been thinking about some questions. If you're not sure how to raise your hand, you can do it physically, or it's under the reactions at the bottom of your screen. There's a little hand that you can click on, and it shows the icon where you are at. We're running a little bit longer than what we anticipated as far as the presentations went, and we know that we had made an initial commitment that the meeting would, the webinar would last about an hour and a half, and we're already an hour and 23 minutes into it. We'll extend the questions a little bit longer, maybe 5 to 10 minutes, but I think we should try and wrap up by 25 to 3. Well, it depends on your time frame wherever you are, but in Ontario, I guess it would be 20 or 25 to 3. So with that in mind, we're going to alternate between the physical and or the icon for the hand here in the showing on the screen. And we'll then veer off to the chat room for every third question. And again, a reminder that for those questions that don't get asked, you may want to type something into the chat room, because we will then distribute them to the presenters, and part of the meeting follow-up will be a response to those questions that we're not able to address with the limited time that we have left. So I am now looking for folks with questions. Yes, Paul.
I just thought there were quite a number of comments made in the chat area related to Bob's presentation. And I think I'd like to just bring those up right now, because many people are expressing interest in that. They're interested in seeing exactly how Bob makes all this work. And I gather between the lines that people are interested in developing this approach in their own conference or church areas. So they're very interested in seeing the details that hopefully Bob will provide us. That's kind of a summary of about 5 or 6 different chat items. So I thought I would start with that because it's timely, because Bob just made his presentation. There's a few other questions, but I'll get to those a little later.
Yeah, just to that point, and so maybe I can ask Garth. So, yeah, when I am ready to launch it further than the Archdiocese of Vancouver, and I want to make St. Vincent de Paul aware of what the program is, who should be my contact person? Yourself, Garth, or somebody else nationally, or what would you?
Why don't we start with Elaine, assuming that your arm's still in good shape? And I know Elaine's fantastic at forwarding information directly. That'd be super. And then we can move forward from there. Elaine, are you okay with that?
Yeah, that'll be great, Bob. Just stay in touch with me. You've got my
Yeah.
contact info. Yeah.
And I suspect the interest in this will go far beyond attendees here today. But it'll be a great platform to begin spreading the news. And
Yeah, and you know what? I know it may sound mystical or magical, but it truly works. Thought about it for a long time, tried to figure out how to do it, and it truly works. As I said, I won't get into the details, but by the time Saturday and Sunday is over in one parish, you will have collected anywhere between 200 and 500 written confirmations with phone number and name and email address of people who want to do more for the Lord. It's and the Holy Spirit's at work here. So it will work in your parish. Doesn't matter how big, how small.
thanks, Bob.
Great, thank you, Bob. Okay, back to the questions. I think we're all clear that it's a bit of a waiting game to get the information from Bob, because it's very much a pilot project in the works, and he wants to fine tune it before he disseminates that information. So I think we all clearly understand that. Okay, back to questions from anyone. I'm not seeing any hands raised. I'm looking on the screen. I'm not seeing any hands raised. Paul, do you want to go to the chat room then and
Well,
see if there's a
just
question there?
one follow-up question for Bob. Is there any discussion between bishops about your program?
Not yet. So this is just for the Archdiocese of Vancouver. I know that the bishop has encouraged every single parish priest to allow me to come into their parish to discuss. And so how it kind of works is the Archbishop Michael Miller for Vancouver has written a letter for every single parish, and so now I'm on my quest to. I mean, there's 75 parishes, so I don't know. That's a lot to do, but that's why I want to make sure that when I disseminate this information to all of you and to your parishes and to your diocese, that we've got the bugs out. And so to answer your question, Paul, no, it hasn't gone beyond the Archdiocese of Vancouver, but stay tuned.
Okay, great. Thanks, Bob. Pat, you had a question?
Yeah, thanks. I think that was my question, but it wasn't exactly what I was getting at. My question is there discussion, and maybe people other than Bob might have insight into this, is there discussion at all among Canadian bishops about the role of the Canadian Church in addressing the housing crisis?
I don't know, Bob, you might be able to answer that, but I don't know. I mean, it would be hopefully an agenda item on one of their meetings for the Canadian Council of Bishops. But from my perspective, and it's only mine, we have quite an active Archbishop here in Halifax who's quite supportive of homelessness. We've got the shelters going in the Archdiocese, tiny shelters, et cetera, et cetera. But I think it varies hugely from archdiocese to archdiocese, to tell you the truth. And to get a consensus on it would be quite difficult, but that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be recommended for those that have strong communication ties with archbishops to try and get it on an agenda item.
Especially considering land being such a part of this initiative.
Exactly. And also with the decommissioning of churches, the available properties that might be great assets and looked at for affordable land development. Yeah. Okay, Pat, thank you. Larry.
Yeah, I just want to share, just on topic, the issue of land and availability of land. that the churches might have, that the diocese may have. The current project we're working on came as a result of cooperation between a parish and the diocese. The parish actually is going to sever some land for us to build this particular project. So I would encourage everybody to open up a discussion with your diocese about possible opportunities to build affordable housing. So
Yeah, that's a great point, Larry. Yeah, for sure. That's one way certainly to get the conversation going with regards to what can be done at the archdiocese level to support affordable housing. Garth?
Yeah, I'll also reinforce the bishop's stand on affordable housing. Back in 2019, don't know if you can see it here, but they published a publication around affordable housing. This was in 2019, and I think in a way it might have been the springboard to our national action campaign on housing. So I'd invite you to look that up on Google. Just Google CCCB affordable housing, and you'll find the statement and then the link to the document itself, which speaks directly to the issue of the day.
Thanks for pointing that out. Okay. Looking again for raised hands, not seeing anything. Louise, I had a question for you with regards to your portfolio of community recovery homes. I know you mentioned that there are 14 existing now. And am I understanding you correctly in that the intention is to be looking at, or you're pretty close to getting involved in the operation of at least 10 more?
No, that includes the 10. So we're in them now.
Oh, okay.
So of the 14, 10 are owned by the Toronto Community Housing Corporation. They're going to divest them. So we're taking them.
Oh,
But, you know, every year or two, we do open another one. They're relatively easy to operate and very economical, really, compared to all the other housing that we operate.
sure. And by operating, who's retaining ownership of those?
Toronto Central Council.
Right. And your role is facilitating the operation of them.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You.
Paul, anything from the chat room?
Yeah, there's several questions.
Mhm.
For Louise, it was a question, how do you get the involvement of funders in your project?
That's a good question. What we've done in the past and continue to do is we make sure our local city council knows who we are and what we're doing. So we try to stay very involved with the politicians. We make sure other agencies that are maybe bigger and more well-recognized in the society are aware of what we're doing, because they'll become advocates sometimes without even knowing. And really, and through the parishes and the regular Vista Paul outreach. But that's really it. It's really important to keep your local government officials apprised of what you're trying to do.
So initially, would you say that you got cooperation or support from the municipality, or did you need to have some financing of your own through the society to get you started?
It really depends on what portfolio of housing you're talking about, but you know, the recovery homes came about really because of making it clear to the local city councilor that we were ready and able to provide housing if they could help advocate to get some financial support for it.
Do you provide any shelters for children?
No, we don't. Going back to what Larry was saying, you have to keep an open mind to see what's out there. And as our spaces became available, so we get things two ways. We have stuff and we go look for funding, or funders come to us. So when you have a property available and you go speak to whoever, they'll tell you what they want to put in there. And the need for us, or when we came to the table, was single women. Not to say that there's adequate housing for families everywhere, but that was the pressing need in the shelter system. So they asked us to go that route. If we had said, no, we're only doing families, they might have said, well, thank you, but we need this other opportunity. So you have to keep an open mind and go where the dollars are and go where the direction is from city staff who are, I guess, studying it and make these determinations.
Second question, maybe third question. Question came up involving the rule of the society, where there's a rule that says that the society cannot transfer funds to other
Right.
organizations. And
Mhm.
wondering how you get around those or that particular rule when you operate maybe in partnership with somebody else.
Sure. So, I mean, that rule is there for a very specific reason. It needs to be very well protected because when people put their money in the poor box, they expect the society to make the determination how to spend it. They're not giving it to you to make decisions elsewhere, and that's all part of the stewardship of the organization. But it doesn't stop conferences and councils from partnering and being part of outreach. You just have to check to make sure you're not compromising your own internal governing documents or the CRA. So, you know, funds given to the society are for the use by the society. So if you're running something in somebody else's building, that's okay if you're involved in, but you just can't take money and hand it over. You have to be part of it, as the comment is in the chat box. So really just look for guidance. There's so many creative ways to do it properly. And as long as donors are fully aware of what you're doing, then, you know, you can do things in the organization that if you're working with another organization or you're partnering with a corporate entity, you just have to protect the society's name and the intention under the rule. So just check it out. But there's a lot of ways to make it happen for sure.
Okay, sorry, folks, I just want to interrupt for a second. Paul, I'm going to hand it over to you, both the online chat and also I've got to leave because I've got to read at Mass. So I've
There you
got
go.
15 minutes to make it to church. So thanks very much, folks. And it was a great meeting. And Paul, I'll hand all the question asked back over to you. And I'm sure there probably isn't too much longer left in the meeting anyway, but okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, folks.
Thank you, Ray.
Bye.
Thank you, Ray. Okay, anybody else have any questions? Okay, Garth?
Yeah, Larry, I'd like to ask in your experience, what is the turnaround time, especially on larger projects that you've been involved with, from inception to completion? What are they, and are you seeing any momentum with the Rapid Housing Initiative and the various CMHC programs that are there to create home housing quicker than maybe it has in the past?
I do believe it is a little quicker, but even the most, optimistic time frame you should consider is 3 years from your, geez, we'd like to build affordable housing to actually have tenants walking in the door. And really, so the worst case scenario would be 5, and well, not the latest one should be 5. If you've done everything correct, it should be 5. And so I think if you say target, if we can do it under 4, that would be great in today's world. So it takes a while to actually, bring it to, and this is the reason you might want to consider, and we'll be considering this in the London program, of trying to initiate multiple projects as opposed to one. And this is new, so I hope my colleagues on here are not, really upset with me at this moment. But because there's such a length of time between, inception to, to opening the doors, I think you can handle, a couple, and you might have very much like you become, in effect, a land developer, and you should understand that that's part of the role you're assuming. So the key is get some land, get it, work on it over time to get it shovel ready for a funder, mostly CMHE and your municipality support you. support the project and support your dream. So I would suggest, if possible, raise money in order to buy multiple, plots of land sites, and then work on them, develop them with site plans and so on. So working to get them ready so that when, you present them, you're not starting from scratch, do one and go right to the end and then pick up number two and then go right to the end. You could do 2 or 3 at the same time. So a little bit of multitasking in terms of projects. And so you always keep your ear open for sites and fundraise with the possibility of building a reserve that you're able to purchase, or at least put a deposit down to put the possibility of developing them and purchase them within a 2-year framework. So that would be my suggestion to those who want to get into building affordable housing in their community.
Thanks, Larry.
I've got a related question, Larry, that came partially through the chat discussion, and that is clearly you're having to get approval from a municipality for an affordable housing project. And I would think from a city's perspective that there's somewhat of a competitive situation between the not-for-profit and the profit sector. And just wondering, does that present challenges when you're going to the municipality to get assistance with a particular project?
I don't think so. The city is so, certainly London, I can speak directly to London, but I'm pretty sure this is cities across the country are experiencing. The need is so great that they're welcoming and they're trying to facilitate them as much as possible. And it's not a competitive situation. First of all, specifically about affordable housing, the private sector is not interested in building affordable housing. And they're not interested because there's simply no money in it. There's no reason for them to do it. They would rather support people, nonprofits who would build it. So they're going to go on their own track. They're going to go and make their applications as they normally do. But my experience here in London is that the building department is very open and very receptive to proposals that want to build affordable housing.
Okay, anybody else got any questions?
Can I just add one last quick thing, and then I mentioned we had taken over that Barrie home. And that was run by volunteers for 20 years. So we have staff because we have so many different types of services and they require direct care, a lot of our residents. But for that type of housing, affordable housing and the recovery, that was 20 years of Vincentians running that program, and they did very, very well at it. It just, things changed in their demographics, and I think some of the changes or the challenges we all have with our conferences. So that's a good long run. So just because you may not be able to hire staff, you don't really want to go down that road, you can still open programs without having to have full teams of people working. You just need to know what you're getting into. That's the important message.
Do you have a training program for your staff?
Oh yeah, we have staff that are in all different levels of training experience, and some of them are PSWs, some are social workers, some are mental health outreach workers. It really just depends or addiction counselors. It really just depends which housing envelope they're working with.
Have you had any zoning issues or conflicts with residents nearby in any of these facilities?
Oh gosh, all the time. I'm like the most popular, unpopular person in Toronto. Some of them open very easily. There's zoning issues. You can only open so many group homes within so many feet, like everywhere else. Scarborough is much more lenient than Etobicoke for some reason. So you have to really work with your local offices because you just can't go into some areas. But every time we open a program, we have a neighborhood meeting and we draw on our politicians that we've made friends with to stand there beside us. There's different, under Bill 23, you'll notice there's a lot of different amendments for people trying, more homes faster. Bill, there is provisions there for some zoning amendments that will speed up the process, but you really have to rely on I'm not an expert in housing. I know how to run shelters once they're open. I know what to do to get them open. But you need to rely on your experts in the field and your building departments and things like that to steer your course. So you really should be reaching out to those folks if you're trying to do something that's a little bit bigger than just one little standalone house. You need them on your side for sure. Our shelters are big, like they're not the 100-bed shelters that you see around, but Mary's Home is a big facility and you really need to know what your neighbors are going to put up with and that kind of thing. But you know what? It works out usually in the end because they know who their neighbors are, right? Not everybody's got a great neighbor, shelter or no shelter.
How the Lord does his job.
Absolutely. You got to just keep chipping away at it. That's it.
Unless there's any other questions, I think I'll turn it back to Garth. I haven't seen any new chat questions, so maybe I'll give it back to you, Garth.
Okay, Paul, thank you very much. And I thank Larry, Louise, and Bob for their insights
Thanks.
today. It's been a phenomenal 2 hours. It went a bit longer than expected, so I thank all of you for hanging in throughout the 2 hours. And again, as I mentioned, we will make sure that the recording of this does reach you in the days to come, along with any other documents that were referred to. And with that, what I'll ask is, I mention again that if you are interested in joining our national committee, please reach out to us. My email is garthbrown@simpatico.ca, and we'd welcome new members. We are coast to coast, but we'd love to fill in the country with more perspectives and understanding of what every province is in need of and can benefit from. So with that, I'll share my screen. And Paul, if I could ask you to provide our closing prayer, that would be appreciated. 1 second for share here.
Okay, everyone, this is a prayer that our Social Justice Committee in Halifax uses at each of its meetings, and we thought we would present it to you today. Lord, you asked for my hands that you might use them for your purpose. I gave them for a moment, then withdrew them, for the work was hard. You asked for my mouth to speak out against injustice. I gave you a whisper that I might not be accused. You asked for my eyes to see the pain of poverty. I closed them, for I did not want to see. You asked for my life that you might work through me. I gave a small part that I might not get too involved. Lord, forgive my efforts to serve you, only when it's convenient for me to do so, only in those places where it is safe to do so, and only with those who make it easy to do so. Forgive me, renew me, and send me out.
Amen.
Amen.
Thank you very much, Paul. And again, thank you everyone for today. It's been enlightening, and I wish you all the best. Have a great weekend ahead, and God bless you all. Thank you.
Thanks.